Close to My Heart released 7 beautiful new colors, but you might be wondering how they stack up against the older colors. Well, today we're going to explore just that.
Hello friends! Yay! It's new catalog day. I love this day, and today I thought I would focus on inks. So hopefully you caught my video earlier this week where I showed you everything I got from the 2 new catalogs. We have the annual Essentials catalog and the September-October catalog that launched today, and there are 7 new ink colors. So what I wanted to do is a little feature on the inks and show swatches of the inks. So I'm going to stamp them out so you can see them, but I am also going to compare them to some past colors of inks that are similar. So for example, Rosy is kind of a mashup between raspberry and hollyhock. So I'm going to stamp the Rosy next to the raspberry and the hollyhock so you can see them together and decide, do I really need Rosy, or do I have one of these colors that's going to be close enough, or help you prioritize your list of the inks that you want. So hopefully this is helpful for you and will help you decide which inks to start with or which inks maybe to skip altogether. I think they are all beautiful, and of course I always get all of the new inks, so I will do the swatching work for you and let you decide. So let's go ahead and dive in. So like I said, I'm going to start with the Rosy, and I'm using this new stamp set. This is called Design Elements. I love this stamp set. And I'm using this paint swatch stamp here because it's a nice solid image, and I thought that would be nice for our swatches. And I'm going to do a little bit of Stamping 101 here. I've had some requests for Stamping 101 videos, so we are going to do a combination of swatching inks and Stamp 101. So I'm going to give you all my best tips to get your best stamped images. So when you have a solid image especially, you're going to need a little more seasoning and kind of practicing on your with your stamp, because that solid surface has more room for like bubbles or imperfections. So the first thing you want to do is really season it on something. I like to use my hand. You can use your arm, you can use an eraser, but there's some manufacturing residue left after the stamps are made, so you really just want to get that off. And then the next thing I like to do is to stamp it off onto some scrap paper. So I've got that here, and I'll do my first swatches of Rosy onto my scrap paper. And I should also mention at the same time, I'm working on a foam pad. So this is the back of my Versamat. This is what I use this side up when I'm doing layouts, and I have 2 of them when I'm doing a 2-page layout. Helps me to stay in frame, helps me to line things up and know exactly where I'm placing things. But the back side is meant for stamping. And if you don't have one of these Versamats, then every one of Close to My Heart's stamp sets comes with this foam cushion. It's a little thinner, but it gets the job done. And so you want to put this underneath your paper to stamp. But if you're going to be doing a lot of stamping, this Versamat is a much larger surface, and I highly recommend it, not only for stamping but for working on for your scrapbooking. I love the Versamat. So let's open this up again. The ink pads are magnetic. They open really easily. So if you have arthritis or have a hard time opening things, these older ink pads were way harder to open. These are super, super easy. All right, so we've done our seasoning. Now we're going to practice. I like to kind of swish it, like kind of turn it and pounce it. So when you turn it, you're going to make like little lines in it. Oh, this is really nice and juicy. I love a good new ink pad. So when you go like this, you're going to put little swirls in it. So I like to do that just because it gives it a little bit more friction, and then I'll do some regular pouncing. I'm giving it pretty good pressure because you want to get it covered, and the nice thing is you can see through the block and see that I have a nice coverage. So we are just going to stamp it, and the next tip is to hold it down for a couple of moments because you want to give that ink time to soak into the paper, and then lift it up. Now that is a pretty darn good image. It's a little bit splotchy, but that is going to start clearing up the more we practice. We want to just give this a few practice runs, and that's going to really help us to season our stamp. This is so nice and juicy. I love it. You can get re-inkers for all of the ink pads as well, and just re-ink them as they get dry. And there's other techniques you can do with the re-inkers too. But I learned the hard way recently. My sapphire ink pad was getting low and I didn't have the re-inker, and I was in the middle of mass producing a whole bunch of cards and stamping the sentiment in sapphire, and I had to stop because it was just too dry. I had to order a sapphire re-inker. So I recommend getting the re-inker when you get the ink pad. That way you always have it handy and you can just re-ink your pad whenever you notice it's getting dry. You don't have to wait and place an order and wait for that order to come. So take it from me. All right, I think we've got some pretty good practices. They all actually look very, very good. And I'm just gonna start stamping across. So this one is gonna be Rosie. And we'll do that right here. All right, and then we'll close that up. And I am gonna take my journaling pen and I am just gonna write Rosie. I always think, oh, I'll remember which one is which, and then I don't. Okay, so I'm going to wipe this color off. Now, any pinks or reds always stain the stamps. There's something about the pinks and reds. This is clean now because I've wiped it, but it's just stained. So keep that in mind. There are sometimes purples do that if it's got like a red undertone, and those are the main colors, or if you use archival black. Now I also have this salt cellar. I learned about this from Jennifer McGuire. I actually have the same exact one to keep my kosher salts in the kitchen, but it keeps my chamois, which is wet, and I just wring it out really well, so it's just very damp. It's very well loved. That 2 of these come in the package, so I still have a clean one, but it lasts for a really long time. And then I just put it in here, close the lid, and it will stay moist enough for a week or 2. Like, it stays moist for quite a while depending on how wet it was to begin with. So there is a chamois case you can get from Close to My Heart that came out after I got this. It is flat, so that is an option too if you want it flat, and then that way you just need to take the lid off and kind of put this, like, dab the stamp on the flat chamois. But I have the perfect space for this already in my craft room, so I really like having this, but there is another option as well. All right, so let's do Hollyhock. This is still, might need to be a little re-inked, but we'll get the idea here. So we'll stamp that right next to it. And yeah, definitely needs to be re-inked, but we get the idea. So this is Hollyhock. It's like a little bit grayer. It's not as vibrant, but it's fairly close. When this color was introduced in the Dreammaker collection, they introduced it in that paper pack, but we didn't have an ink yet. So I was using Hollyhock and it worked well enough with the paper. All right, so I've cleaned and dried that. Sometimes when you don't dry it, if it's a little wet still, it'll leave it a little blotchy. And actually this has evened out quite a bit. Those blotches that were there have soaked into the paper and evened out. So now we're gonna do the raspberry, and this is going to be a brighter pink, I believe. I love this color. This color actually retired and Rosie replaced it. But I will always love raspberry. So yeah, it's just a little bit brighter. That probably could stand to be re-inked too. All right, so there are the pinks. Let's do pumpkin now. And the ones that I brought out that were similar are Gold Rush. I think this is the closest match. This is quite old. And then the 2 oranges that we last had, Nectarine is the current orange, and this is just a bit brighter. And then Tangerine is brighter, but it's also lighter. So we'll just compare all of those. Okay, so here's Pumpkin. I really should re-ink my pads more often. And it's so easy to do. You would just take this and go back and forth. I like to do it pretty close together. It depends on how wet or how dry your pad is, but you can do lines going one way that are quite close together, and then lines going the other way that are quite close together. And that should be good. If it's really dry, you might need more than that. But it's very easy to do. All right, next we're gonna do Gold Rush. This is a little bit brighter, I think. Now we've got Nectarine, and just know that I'm cleaning and drying this between each time. I'm not gonna be showing it every time just for the sake of time. This one actually just retired. So this is more of a like true orange. I'm actually kind of sad this left because this is closest to like a true secondary color on the color wheel kind of orange. Now here's Tangerine. Oh, that is quite a bit brighter. I remember when this was in a Halloween collection, it was so fun. So really they're not that close to Pumpkin. You know what? I didn't have Sunset pulled out before, but I'm gonna pull it out so we can see that stamped, because now that this is on paper, it's looking not as bright orange as these. I don't know, I'm gonna try it. It's got like a more pink in it. So we'll add it on though. I'm glad we tried it out. I love doing these experiments. Okay, so for Limeade, I think the closest thing is Sweet Leaf. So let's stamp the Limeade first. It stamps quite a bit darker than it looks on here, but these all dry back. As it soaks into the paper and dries, it will become lighter. So you'll notice that all of these dry a little differently than when they first stamp. So there's the Sweet Leaf. It could stand to be re-inked. Maybe I'll actually try my best to line it up and do it again. Okay, so there it is, double stamped. It is very close. So if you have a good Sweet Leaf and a re-inker, it is the closest match so far, I think. So that's Limeade and Sweet Leaf. I think I'll do the other greens here just so we don't run out of room. So we've got Jade, and then Green Apple, which is the current color that just retired. So the latest color to retire, that's the closest. And then Willow is from quite a while ago. So we'll try all of those. Ooh, that's darker than I expected. Of course, it's gonna dry back, but that looks pretty dark. It's so pretty. All right, so there's Jade. That kind of changes my mind on what it might match the best, but we'll go ahead and continue. So this is going to be Willow. And here is Green Apple. Okay, so I also tried Julep because once I saw this stamped, it looks more yellow here. And once I saw it stamped, it looked a little bit closer to Julep. So Julep was the color of the year a couple years ago. I stamped that twice because it was a little bit dry, but look at how close that is. I think that is a closer match than either of these. So if you have Julep from a couple years ago, you might be able to get by, but this Jade really is just so pretty. Okay guys, Journey. Is it closer to Peacock or is it closer to Pacifica? I think that Pacifica and Peacock had a baby and its name was Journey. That's what I think. But let's swatch them. Let's see which ones look closer. You know what? I'm going to stamp one of these first, and then Journey will be right in between, so we can get a really close up to them. All right. Pacifica. That'll dry back a little. It's hard to write and talk at the same time. All right, here is Journey. Oh, it's so pretty. I love it. I'm going to clean this right away. It's a little blotchy. I think that's just because it was just slightly wet still when I stamped it. So be sure to dry your stamps really well before you stamp them again, or set them aside and let them dry, or they get a little bit splotchy like that. But that's okay. We can still tell how pretty it is. So that is Journey. And then let's do Peacock. See, some of these were really hard to open. Aren't you glad we don't have this kind anymore? This Peacock was practically new. The Journey is actually quite a bit lighter than I expected. It's lighter than Peacock. It's actually quite a bit lighter than both of them. Yeah, these both are quite a bit darker than Journey. I'm surprised. You know what? I'm gonna try Lagoon. Now, Lagoon is gonna be a lot brighter. It's got more green in it, I guess. But just for comparison's sake, while we're at it, because a lot of these swatches have surprised me quite a bit. It's almost like these three had a baby. Can that happen? No, there's too much green in this. Okay, now for Royal, I'm comparing it to Gypsy and Grape. I'm just showing you a comparison because there's not really another color that's close enough. The Grape is a lot more red purple. This is a lot more blue purple. Gypsy is, I think, probably closer, but we will try them all just for fun because we can. Okay, so here is the new Royal. It's so nice to work with an inky pad. Remind me to re-ink all my pads. If you have Hydrangea, which is from a long time ago, I don't have that ink, but I bet Hydrangea would be a good one to compare as well. Okay, so this is the new Royal. That is very pretty. It does definitely look very royal. All right, here's Gypsy. Now, I do have the re-inker for this, but I haven't re-inked it because I really don't use it anymore. Since there's no paper packs made with it, I don't really use it, but that is fairly close. So if you have Gypsy, you might be able to get away with using that in place of Royal. And let me just show you Grape. That would be the next closest since I don't have Hydrangea. All right, so now we're gonna compare Acorn and Toffee. There are probably some older colors similar to these, but I'm just gonna go ahead and compare these because they are the newest. So Acorn is the new color. Toffee actually did not retire. It is still around, but we will see how close they are. I showed in my unboxing video the side-by-side comparison of the cardstocks, and you could tell that the Acorn was darker and warmer. So we'll see how the inks compare. I love Toffee. Toffee's a great color for ink distressing, like edge distressing or antiquing things, and so Acorn probably would be good too, but I think Toffee's gonna be a little bit lighter, so it depends on how antiqued you want something to be. All right, so here is Toffee. Okay, and there's Toffee. Right now they do look very similar. I think you can tell this is warmer and a little darker. This is gonna dry back. It's a little splotchy because it wasn't quite dry all the way when I stamped it, but they are very close. So I would say if you have Toffee, you probably don't need Acorn, but it is a very nice color. I really like it. So one thing I did want to point out in my Stamping 101, now a lot of people have stamp positioners, and if you use a stamp positioner, you can get different sizes of them, like the Misty. I just have the mini Misty and it is very stained on the cover. I need to clean it. And I use this when I'm using intense black ink and I want to keep going and getting that intense black line of my stamps really dark for when I'm going to be doing coloring with my alcohol markers. That's really the only time I use this. The beauty of this is that you can keep stamping it, line up your paper in one spot, hold it down with your magnets, and then you can feel confident that if you mess up, you can just stamp it again. One thing to point out though is that a lot of times you're not going to get a perfect stamp the first time, and I think that's because this plastic is so thin, you don't have as much leverage, or you know, it's just not as stable. So when you're pressing this down, you're going to rub it and rub in the ink from the stamp pad, but I have trouble. I have tons of practice in stamping. I usually can get a good first impression with a block, not always with the MISTI. So I just want to point that out. If you're thinking about investing in a MISTI or something, there are some other stamp positioners out there as well. You might want to just try a block, like maybe get this 2x2 size for your smaller stamps and try that, because this thicker block really gives you good leverage and has such a good thick solid surface to get you a good image. You saw these these are very solid images, and solid images are the hardest to stamp well, and you can see how well all of mine stamped. Now, some of them have a little blotchiness to them. That's because the stamp was wet, so keep that in mind. And some of them were drying out a little bit, but even this one, let's see, these two are the ones that I stamped twice, and they still look very smooth, and I think that they all look really good. So I just want to point that out if you are a beginner stamper, and you know, just another tip to point out for you.
So there you have it. Let me give you a close-up look at the swatches now that they're fully dry, so you can get a really good look at the final results. All of the new products are now available. The link to my website is in the description below. I hope this video was helpful for you, and if it was, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more scrapbooking inspiration. If you missed my unboxing video with a giveaway, be sure to check that out on screen now. Thanks for watching and have a great day.